The chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station built by hands that had touched the cosmos long before humanity learned to make fire. Tai-Ho Kim stood alone in the entrance hall, watching through transparent walls as ships from a dozen different worlds docked at the enormous structure. Each vessel was different. Some looked like living creatures, others like geometric impossibilities. His own shuttle sat among them, small and plain, built with human hands just 40 years ago. He adjusted his collar and walked forward. The doors opened without sound, revealing the council chamber beyond. 12 pedestals rose from the floor in a circle, each holding a representative from the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Above them, holographic displays showed star maps and data streams Tai-Ho couldn't fully understand. Even with his years of study, the Krethian warlord spoke first. Threxus stood nearly 3 meters tall, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights. 4 arms crossed over his chest as he gestured toward Tai-Ho with contempt. The human comes begging again. How many sessions will we waste on this primitive world? Tai-Ho remained still. He had learned that stillness often said more than words among these beings. Earth requests protected status under galactic law. We seek only time to develop without interference. Protected status. Threxus laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your world achieved faster than light travel 3 years ago. You have 47 military vessels, primitive weapons, and no understanding of real power. Why should the Council waste resources protecting you? One of the other representatives, a floating crystalline entity from the Ethel Collective, shimmered with what might have been agreement. The Krethian makes a valid point. Protection requires justification. What does Earth offer in return? Tai-Ho had prepared for this. He pulled a data chip from his pocket and activated it. Holographic images filled the space above the council floor. Art, music, literature, mathematical theories, scientific discoveries. Humanity's best achievements, compressed into a 30-second display. Threxus waved a claw dismissively. Poetry and paintings. Every species creates these things. Show me something of actual value. Knowledge has value, Tai-Ho said quietly. Understanding has value. We offer perspective. A new voice in the galaxy. A voice that will be silent soon enough. Threxus turned to address the full council. The Krethian Empire formally claims the Sol system and all its planets. Human resistance is anticipated and will be dealt with accordingly. We will strip the system of its resources and relocate the human population to appropriate labor colonies. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tai-Ho felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. He had known this was coming. The intelligence reports had been clear. The Krethians wanted Earth's water, its minerals, its position near a major trade route. Humanity was just an obstacle to be removed. The Council recognizes the Krethian claim, the Ethel representative announced. Does anyone object? Silence filled the chamber. Tai-Ho looked from one representative to another, seeing indifference, boredom, or calculation in their alien features. None of them cared. To them, Earth was just another world, humans just another species to be catalogued and forgotten. Then, from the highest pedestal, a voice spoke. It was soft, barely audible, but every being in the chamber froze. I object. Tai-Ho looked up. The highest pedestal belonged to the Observer, a position granted only to the eldest species in the galaxy. For 300 years, the Observer had sat in silence, watching council proceedings without comment. Most representatives had forgotten he could speak at all. Elder Vorthus rose slowly from his seat. He was smaller than Tai-Ho expected, hunched with age beyond counting. His skin looked like ancient paper, and his eyes were clouded with time. But when he spoke again, his voice carried weight that made the station itself seem to tremble. Touch not the world of Sol. Its people are. forged in a crucible you cannot comprehend. Threxus stared at the elder with surprise that quickly turned to mockery. The observer speaks at last, and he speaks nonsense. Humans are weak. Their weapons are primitive. Their ships are slow. What crucible could possibly make them a threat to the Crethian Empire? Vorthis descended from his pedestal, moving with painful slowness. Taiho watched as the ancient being approached the center of the chamber. I have lived 4,000 of your years, warlord. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations burn and empires crumble. And I tell you now, with all the authority of my age, that you are making a grave mistake. You are old and confused, Threxus said. Step aside. I stood on Earth 50,000 years ago. Vorthis continued as if the warlord hadn't spoken. My people descended to that world when humans were still using stone tools. We thought them simple. We thought them weak. We were wrong. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the data streams seemed to pause. They hunted us, Vorthis said softly. With rocks and sharpened sticks, they hunted us. We had weapons that could level mountains. We had ships that could cross star systems. And they hunted us. For months, they tracked our expeditions. They learned our patterns. They struck when we were vulnerable and vanished when we sought revenge. We lost 70% of our people before we fled that world. And do you know what haunted me most? No one answered. They never stopped. We killed hundreds of them. Thousands. They kept coming. No strategy we employed broke their will. No show of force made them surrender. They simply adapted and continued. That is the crucible I speak of. Earth breeds a kind of determination that the civilized galaxy has forgotten. Threxus laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Ancient history. Primitive ancestors with primitive minds. Modern humans are soft. They seek peace. They come here begging for protection. They seek peace because they understand what war truly means, Vorthis said. They know it's cost better than any species in this chamber. But if you force them to fight, they will show you things you cannot imagine. The Ethel representative shimmered with what might have been amusement. The observer's warning is noted for the record. However, without concrete evidence of human capability, the Crethian claim stands. Does the human representative have anything to add? Taiho stepped forward. He looked directly at Threxus, meeting the alien's multifaceted eyes without fear. We came here hoping for peace. We asked for protection because we wanted to avoid bloodshed. But you've made your choice, and we accept it. Surrender now and your people will be treated well, Threxus said. I didn't say we would surrender. Taiho's voice remained calm, almost conversational. I said we accept your choice. You've chosen war. That's something humans understand very well. We've had over 10,000 years of practice. You threaten me? Threxus moved closer, towering over the human. Your entire fleet couldn't destroy one of my ships. Maybe not, Taiho agreed. But war isn't just about ships and weapons, is it? It's about will. It's about how much you're willing to sacrifice. How far you're willing to go. And in that contest, Warlord, I promise you something. You will learn what the Elder tried to warn you about. Taiho turned and walked toward the exit. As he reached the doors, he looked back one final time. The Crethian fleet will arrive at Earth within the week. We'll be waiting. I hope your gods are kinder than your warriors, Threxus. You're going to need their mercy. The doors closed behind him, leaving the council in stunned silence. Elder Vorthis returned to his pedestal, moving slowly, his expression sad. I warned them, he whispered to himself. I told them Earth's power must never be tested. Threxus watched the human leave, then turned to his military advisors. Prepare the fleet. We move on Earth immediately. I want this finished before their pathetic determination can spread to other protected worlds. Show the galaxy what happens when primitives refuse the generous offer of the Krethian Empire. In the back of the chamber, Vorthis closed his ancient eyes and waited for the news he knew would come. Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the EDS Indomitable, watching the long-range sensors with growing concern. 200 contacts, each one representing a Krethian warship capable of destroying continents. They moved through space in perfect formation, a wall of destruction heading straight for Earth. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, their faces showing the same fear he felt in his chest. Time until they reach lunar orbit? Hyunwoo asked. 14 hours at current speed, Lieutenant Yuna Han replied from her tactical station. She was 26 years old, the youngest person ever to hold the position. Right now, she looked like she might be sick. Sir, our entire fleet is 47 ships. The smallest Krethian vessel outguns our flagship by a factor of 3. I can count, Lieutenant. Hyunwoo kept his voice steady. Fear was contagious on a military vessel, and he couldn't let it spread. What's the status of our defensive positions? All ships are in position around Luna. Ground batteries are active. Civilian evacuations are 70% complete. Yuna paused, then added quietly, Admiral, we can't win this fight. No, Hyunwoo agreed. We can't, not if we fight the way they expect us to. He turned to face his crew. 30 people, all volunteers, all knowing they might not survive the next day. Listen carefully. Everything we're about to do will seem wrong. It will seem cowardly. It will seem like we're throwing away every rule of military engagement. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? They nodded, though he saw doubt in their eyes. Good. Doubt meant they were thinking. Captain Minho, get me a channel to Dr. Choi on the lunar station. The communications officer worked his controls. And a moment later, Dr. Nari Choi's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted, her lab coat stained with machine oil, and her hair pulled back in a messy knot. Behind her, Hyunwoo could see massive weapons being assembled by teams of engineers. Admiral, Nari said, Project Prometheus is ready. I have to warn you, though. These weapons are based on old technology. Very old. Some of it dates back to the 21st century. Will they work? They'll work. The question is whether they'll work well enough. Nari gestured to something off-screen. We've built kinetic bombardment platforms, nuclear-tipped missiles, chemical weapons, biological agents, and about 100 other things the galaxy considers primitive or barbaric. If the Council knew what we were preparing, they'd condemn us immediately. The Council abandoned us, Hyunwoo said flatly. We use whatever we have. How many platforms can you deploy? 40, scattered across the lunar surface. Each one can fire independently. But Admiral, these weapons require close range. The Krethians will see them coming. Let them see. Captain Minho, broadcast my message on all frequencies. I want every Krethian ship to hear this. Minho nodded and opened the channel. Hyunwoo took a breath, thinking about his daughter back on Earth, probably watching this on the news feeds. He hoped she would understand. This is Admiral Hyunwoo Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered our space uninvited. You have threatened our world. You have declared your intention to enslave our people. We reject your claim. We reject your authority. And we reject your demand for surrender. If you want Earth, come and take it. He cut the transmission. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then the Krethian response came through, Warlord Threxus's voice dripping with contempt. Brave words from a dead man. Your ships will be destroyed. Your world will be claimed. Your people will learn their place. This is your last chance. Surrender now, or be annihilated. Hyunwoo smiled, though there was no humor in it. All ships retreat to lunar orbit. Make it look panicked. I want them to think we're running scared. The Earth fleet scattered, engines burning hot as they pulled back toward the moon. On the sensors, Hyunwoo watched the Krethian formation. Perfect, precise, every ship exactly where it should be according to their military doctrine. They moved like a dance, like something rehearsed and refined over thousands of years. They're following, Yuna reported. Formation unchanged. They're not even adjusting for our retreat. Why would they? Minho said from the captain's chair. They've probably fought 100 wars against species that use similar tactics. Perfect formations, honor in battle, clean engagements. They're expecting us to turn and fight eventually. Then let's give them something unexpected. Hyunwoo pulled up a tactical display. Lieutenant Han analyzed their formation. Find the patterns. I want to know where every ship will be 5 minutes from now. Yuna worked quickly, her fingers dancing across her controls. Sir, they're predictable. Every maneuver follows standard Krethian military doctrine. If they maintain current behavior, I can predict their positions with 95% accuracy. 95% is good enough. Hyunwoo opened a channel to all Earthships. All vessels, listen carefully. We're not going to fight a clean battle. We're not going to engage them ship to ship. We're going to make them afraid. Commanders, you have operational freedom. Use any tactic, any weapon, any strategy you can think of. The only rule is this: make them regret coming here. On the lunar surface, Nari watched her screens as the Krethian fleet approached. She had spent 6 months building these weapons, working from old blueprints and archived military documents. The galaxy had moved past such primitive, destructive tools centuries ago. They considered chemical weapons barbaric, nuclear weapons crude, kinetic bombardment wasteful. Humans had used all of them. She thought about her grandfather, who had fought in the last major war on Earth, back when nations still killed each other over resources and ideology. He had told her stories about desperate battles, about fighting with whatever you had, about winning not through superior technology, but through superior will. Doctor, one of her assistants called. The Krethian vanguard is in range. Target their lead ships, Nari ordered. Fire everything. The lunar surface erupted. 40 platforms launched their payloads simultaneously. Kinetic weapons, simple tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles with yields capable of destroying cities. Chemical payloads designed to eat through metal and flesh. All of it thrown at the approaching fleet like rocks from a slingshot. The Krethians detected the launches immediately. Their defensive systems activated, shooting down most of the incoming weapons with practiced efficiency. But not all of them. 3 nuclear weapons detonated against Krethian shields, electromagnetic pulses disrupting their formation. 2 kinetic rods punched through a destroyer's armor, tearing it apart from the inside. Aboard the Krethian command ship, Threxus watched his tactical display with growing irritation. Primitive weapons. Crude tactics. But effective enough. All ships maintain formation and return fire. Destroy those lunar platforms. The Krethian fleet fired, their weapons far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. Energy beams crossed the void, striking the lunar surface with devastating effect. 20 platforms disappeared in clouds of vaporized rock and metal. But the remaining 20 kept firing, launching everything they had. They're not stopping, one of Threxus's officers said. Sir, they're firing faster now. They're throwing everything at us without regard for accuracy or efficiency. Because they're desperate, Threxus said. Increase speed. We'll overwhelm them through superior firepower. That's when the Earth ships stopped retreating. 47 vessels turned in space and accelerated directly at the Krethian fleet. not in formation, not with coordinated tactics. They came in wild, chaotic patterns that made no sense according to any military doctrine Threxus had ever studied. What are they doing? He demanded. His tactical officer studied the incoming ships with confusion. Sir, they're not following any recognizable attack pattern. Some are approaching head-on. Others are using lunar gravity to slingshot around at impossible angles. 3 ships are moving together, but the rest are independent. I can't predict their movements. Then shoot them all. The Krethian fleet opened fire. The first wave of Earthships died quickly, their shields collapsing under the superior firepower. But as they died, they did something Threxus had never seen before. They didn't retreat. They didn't try to escape. They accelerated into the Krethian ships, ramming them with their burning hulks. The EDC Courage struck a Krethian cruiser at full speed, its reactor overloading on impact. The explosion took out 2 more Krethian ships that were too close, flying in that perfect formation that made them vulnerable to such tactics. They're suicidal, Threxus's officer shouted. Sir, they're deliberately destroying their own ships to damage ours. Hyun Woo watched from the Indomitable as 12 Earth vessels died, taking down 15 Krethian ships. It hurt. Every death hurt. But it was working. The Krethian formation was breaking apart, ships pulling away from each other to avoid the kamikaze attacks. All fighters. Launch now, he ordered from the surviving Earthships. Small fighters deployed. Single-pilot craft that were little more than engines and weapons strapped together. They dove into the Krethian formation like insects, too small to target effectively, too many to track individually. Pilot Jiwan Kong flew her fighter through the chaos, her heart pounding. She had trained for this. Not in simulation, but in atmosphere. Dogfighting in Earth skies where gravity and wind created unpredictable conditions. The Krethians fought in the clean vacuum of space, where physics were simple and tactics were calculated. She flew like she was still in atmosphere, making turns that should have been impossible, using the moon's gravity to whip around in directions that confused the Krethian targeting systems. Her weapons were primitive compared to theirs, but she got close. So close she could see the hull plating of their ships before she fired. One Krethian destroyer exploded as she punched through its shield with sheer momentum and planted a nuclear charge directly on its hull. She didn't wait to see it detonate. She was already moving, already hunting the next target. Across the battlefield, 30 other pilots did the same. Crazy maneuvers, reckless attacks, tactics that made no sense but worked because they made no sense. Threxus watched his fleet's casualties mount and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. These humans weren't fighting like any species he knew. They weren't trying to win through superior force or clever strategy. They were simply refusing to lose, throwing themselves at his ships with a ferocity that defied logic. Sir, we've lost 40 ships, his officer reported. Recommend we pull back and reassess. No, Threxus straightened in his command chair. We have superior numbers, superior technology. We will prevail. All ships. Advance. Destroy every human vessel. Show them what real power looks like. On the Indomitable, Hyunwoo received reports of the Krethian advance. They were coming in hard now, abandoning their formations, trying to match human chaos with Krethian aggression. Good. Angry opponents made mistakes. Dr. Choi, are your platforms ready for Phase 2? On the lunar surface, Nari smiled grimly. Ready, Admiral. Deploying now. The remaining 20 platforms rotated, revealing new weapons. Not explosives. Not kinetic rods. Something simpler and far more terrible. Mining lasers, repurposed from civilian equipment, designed to cut through asteroid rock. At close range, they could slice through ship armor like paper. The Krethian fleet flew directly into range, and Nari gave the order. 20 beams of concentrated light reached out and touched Krethian ships. Metal boiled. Hulls split open. Atmosphere vented into space, carrying crew members with it. They're using civilian equipment as weapons. Threxus's officer sounded almost offended. That's not military technology. That's mining gear. I don't care what it is, Threxus shouted. Destroy those platforms. Destroy everything on that moon. But it was too late. The damage was done. 50 more Krethian ships were crippled or destroyed, and the human fleet was still coming. Still attacking with that relentless determination that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Hian Wu watched the battle unfold and allowed himself a small smile. They were losing. Earth's fleet was being destroyed. But they were taking the Krethians with them, ship for ship, life for life. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered something his grandfather had told him about humanity's wars. We don't fight to win. We fight until the enemy can't. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and Warlord Threxus was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. His fleet had lost 90 ships. 90. The humans had started with 47. By every logical calculation, they should have been annihilated in the first hour. Yet somehow, they were still fighting. On his command screen, he watched a damaged Earth destroyer limp through space, engines barely functional, hull breached in a dozen places. Any sane crew would have abandoned ship. Instead, they turned toward the nearest Krethian cruiser and accelerated. The destroyer's reactor signature spiked, reading critical levels. They're going to ram us again, his tactical officer said, voice tight with something that might have been fear. Intercept course locked. Impact in 40 seconds. Destroy it. Threxus ordered. Energy weapons lanced out, striking the approaching destroyer. Its shields were already down. The beams tore through armor, ripping chunks of metal away. But the ship kept coming. Even as it broke apart, even as sections tumbled away into space, the main hull maintained course. 20 seconds. The Krethian cruiser tried to maneuver away, but the human ship adjusted, matching the movement. 10 seconds. Threxus could see tiny figures floating in the wreckage now. Human crew members exposed to vacuum, still alive for a few more precious moments. 5 seconds. The human ship's reactor went critical. The explosion consumed both vessels, a miniature star blooming in the darkness. When it faded, debris tumbled through space, glowing hot. 2 ships destroyed. 1 human, 1 Krethian. An equal trade that the humans seemed perfectly willing to make. This is madness, Threxus's second-in-command said. They're killing themselves to kill us. What species does this? Threxus didn't answer. He was reviewing casualty reports, trying to find some pattern, some weakness he could exploit. But the humans had no pattern. Every ship fought differently. Every captain made different choices. It was chaos, and chaos was impossible to predict. On Mars, Major Dayan Lee watched the Krethian landing craft descend toward the red planet's surface. 3 ships, probably carrying 500 soldiers each. They had bypassed Earth's moon, choosing instead to establish a forward base on Mars, where human defenses were minimal. They didn't know about the mining colonies. They didn't know about the 10,000 people who lived and worked in the tunnels beneath Mars's surface. They didn't know that those tunnels were filled with explosives. Dayan crouched behind a rock formation, watching through his helmet's display as the Krethian ships landed. Their soldiers emerged, massive beings in powered armor, carrying weapons that could level buildings. They moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter, setting up defensive positions. Wait for it, Dayan whispered into his com. Around him, scattered across the Martian landscape, 50 volunteers waited with him. Not soldiers, engineers, miners, people who knew how to bring down mountains. The Krethians advanced toward what looked like an abandoned mining facility. Dayan smiled. Not abandoned. When the first Krethians stepped across the marked boundary, Dayan triggered the charges. The Martian ground erupted. Decades of mining had left Mars honeycomb with tunnels, and those tunnels were now packed with explosives. The blast threw rocks the size of houses into the air. The Krethian base disappeared into a crater half a kilometer wide. "Now!" Dayan shouted, and his people opened fire. They didn't have military weapons. They had mining lasers, construction equipment, industrial tools repurposed for war. A woman named Soman Park fired her rock cutter, a tool designed to slice through stone, directly into a Krethian soldier's armor. The beam punched through, dropping the alien where he stood. The Krethians returned fire, their weapons far superior. Dayan watched 3 of his people die in the first exchange. But the survivors didn't retreat. They scattered among the rocks, using the terrain they knew better than any outsider ever could. "They're ambushing us," a Krethian commander broadcast. "Fall back to the ships." But there were more charges. Dayan had planted them along every logical retreat path. As the Krethians ran, the ground beneath them exploded. Rocks fell. Tunnels collapsed. Within minutes, the organized military force had devolved into scattered survivors. Trying desperately to reach their landing craft, Salman drove a mining vehicle directly into one of the ships. Her vehicle loaded with every explosive she could find. The detonation split the landing craft in half. She didn't survive, but neither did the 200 Krethian soldiers trying to evacuate aboard it. Dayan fell back into the tunnels, his surviving people with him. 15 left out of 50. The Krethians would send reinforcements. They would hunt through the tunnels. But those tunnels spread for thousands of kilometers. And Dayan's people knew every passage, every chamber, every hiding spot. The Krethians would find out what it meant to fight an enemy on their home ground. An enemy who refused to fight fair. In space above Earth. Pilot Jiwan Kong's fighter had taken damage. Her left engine was dead, her shields were gone, and she was running on reserve oxygen. By all rights, she should have retreated, found a place to land, and waited out the battle. Instead, she targeted the largest Krethian ship she could find. It was a dreadnought, probably the flagship. Its shields could tank hits from Earth's biggest weapons. Its armor was meters thick. There was no way her small fighter could damage it, unless she got creative. Jiwan checked her fuel levels. Enough for maybe 10 more minutes of maneuvering. She armed her last missile, a small nuclear warhead with barely enough yield to scratch the dreadnought's paint. Then she did something no Krethian pilot would ever consider. She shut down her remaining engine and went dark. Her fighter drifted, tumbling through space like debris. The Krethian sensors swept past her, dismissing the small craft as wreckage. She held her breath, counting seconds, watching the dreadnought grow larger in her viewport. When she was close enough to see individual hull plates, she reactivated her engine. Full burn, the fighter leaped forward, accelerating directly toward the dreadnought's bridge. Alarm screamed. The Krethians finally saw her, but too late. Their point defense weapons fired, missing her small, fast-moving craft by meters. G1 didn't fire her missile. Instead, she crashed directly into the dreadnought's command center, her fighter's reactor set to overload on impact. The explosion was small compared to the massive ship, but it was precisely placed. The dreadnought's bridge shattered, venting atmosphere and crew into space. G1 died instantly. But the Krethian flagship went dark, its command structure destroyed, leaving thousands of soldiers aboard with no leadership. Aboard the Indomitable, Hyunwoo received word of Jiwan's attack. He closed his eyes for a moment, adding her name to the list of people he would never forget. Then he opened a channel to all remaining Earth forces. "This is Admiral Park. I need volunteers for a boarding action." The response was immediate. Every surviving ship reported crew members ready to board enemy vessels. Hyunwoo selected the teams carefully, choosing people who understood what they were being asked to do. Colonel Hana Shin led the first boarding team. She commanded 30 soldiers, all volunteers, all understanding they probably wouldn't come back. They loaded into a civilian cargo hauler, the kind of ship used to transport supplies between Earth and the Moon. The Krethians wouldn't see it as a threat. The cargo ship approached a damaged Krethian cruiser, broadcasting a distress signal. The Krethians, following their military protocols, allowed it to dock. They expected refugees, civilians seeking asylum. They got Hana and her team instead. The soldiers poured into the Krethian ship through the docking port, carrying weapons designed for close-quarters combat. Not energy weapons, not advanced technology. Simple firearms, chemical projectiles that the Krethians considered primitive. But in the narrow corridors of a warship, primitive worked just fine. Hana led her team through the ship, fighting in ways the Krethians had never trained for. Hand-to-hand combat when ammunition ran out, using the ship's own systems against the crew, sealing bulkheads to trap soldiers, venting sections to space. The Krethians fought back, but they were trained for open combat, for honor in battle. Hana's team fought like street fighters, using every advantage, exploiting every weakness. When a Krethian soldier turned a corner, he might face bullets, or an improvised explosive, or a human with a knife who was willing to die taking him down. They're inside our ships. The transmission from the Krethian cruiser reached Threxus's command vessel. They're fighting in our corridors. They won't stop. Even when we kill them, they keep fighting. Threxus watched his tactical display in growing horror. 3 Krethian ships showed internal breaches. Human boarding teams were spreading through them like infections, destroying critical systems, killing crew, turning his own vessels against him. How are they doing this? He demanded. They're not soldiers. They're barely a spacefaring species. His science officer looked up from her station, her expression shaken. "Sir, I've been analyzing human biology. They're persistence hunters. Their bodies are designed for endurance. They can fight for hours without rest. They can survive injuries that would kill most species. And their psychology is different. They don't surrender when the logical choice is to surrender. They keep fighting until they're physically incapable of continuing." "That's not an advantage," Threxus said. "That's insanity. To us, perhaps. But it means they will never stop. Not until they're all dead, or we are." On Earth, Dr. Yoonju Yang studied the Krethian bodies that had been recovered from destroyed ships. She was a xenobiologist, tasked with understanding alien physiology. What she found gave her an idea. "Admiral Park," she transmitted to the Indomitable, "I've found a weakness. The Krethians have powerful bodies, but they evolved on a high-gravity world. They're built for strength, not endurance. In extended combat, they tire quickly. If we can force them into prolonged engagements, they'll exhaust themselves." Hyunwoo considered this. "How prolonged are we talking?" "Hours, maybe less. But here's the thing, Admiral. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We can run for days. We can fight for days. If we turn this into a war of attrition, we have the advantage. Then that's exactly what we'll do." Hyunwoo opened channels to all Earth forces. "New strategy. Don't try to win quick. Make every engagement last as long as possible. Make them chase you. Make them work for every meter of space. Tire them out." The Earth forces adapted immediately. Fighters would engage, then break off before the fight concluded. Ships would fire, then retreat, forcing the Krethians to pursue. On Mars, Bayon's teams would attack and vanish into the tunnels, forcing the Krethians to hunt through kilometers of passages. Hours became days. The Krethians grew slower, more cautious. Their response times increased. Mistakes crept into their tactics. And the humans, those relentless, stubborn humans, kept coming down in the Krethian command ship. Threxus reviewed casualty reports with mounting despair. 120 ships lost. 15,000 soldiers dead. And the humans were still fighting. "Sir, we need to retreat," his second-in-command urged. "Regroup. Request reinforcements." "No." Threxus slammed his claw against the console. "We have superior numbers. Superior technology. We cannot be defeated by these primitives." But even as he said it, he watched another Krethian ship die on his tactical display. A human cargo vessel had rammed it, overloading its reactor, taking both ships into oblivion. For the first time in his military career, Warlord Threxus wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The Elder's warning echoed in his mind. Earth's power must never be tested. He was beginning to understand what that meant. The war had lasted 3 weeks, and Earth was winning. Not through superior technology or brilliant strategy, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. The Krethian fleet had been reduced to 70 ships scattered across the Sol system, each one fighting desperately against human forces that seemed to multiply no matter how many were killed. Warlord Threxus sat in his command chair, staring at reports that made no sense. His forces had killed over 100,000 humans. They had destroyed half of Earth's military infrastructure. They had bombarded civilian targets, hoping to break morale. The humans should have surrendered weeks ago. Instead, they had escalated. Colonel Hannah Shin floated through the corridor of a Krethian destroyer, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored in the zero-gravity section. Behind her, 12 soldiers followed, all wearing combat suits cobbled together from military surplus and civilian equipment. They carried weapons that ranged from advanced plasma rifles to simple shotguns, loaded with armor-piercing rounds. The Krethian crew had retreated to the ship's engineering section, sealing themselves behind reinforced bulkheads. Standard procedure. They probably thought they were safe. Hannah smiled without humor. "Get the breaching charges ready." One of her soldiers, a young man named Taiyang, placed explosive packages against the bulkhead. "Colonel, even if we breach this, there'll be 50 Krethians in there. We're 12 people, and we'd better make each shot count." Hannah checked her rifle's charge. "Remember, they're bigger and stronger than us, but they're not faster, and they're not used to fighting in cramped spaces." Use that. The charges detonated, tearing a hole in the bulkhead. Immediately, energy weapons fire poured through the opening. Hannah's team scattered, using the corridor's structural supports for cover. She signaled to Taiyang, who threw a smoke grenade through the breach. "They have thermal sensors," Hannah reminded her team. "The smoke won't blind them, but it'll make them think we're coming through." Instead, she led her team around, using the ship's maintenance tunnels. The Krethians had designed their vessels for efficiency, not security. They had never considered that enemies might board their ships and use the infrastructure against them. Hannah's team emerged in engineering from 3 different access points simultaneously. The Krethians, focused on the breached bulkhead, didn't see them until it was too late. The humans opened fire, targeting critical systems as much as enemy soldiers. The Krethian commander roared orders, trying to organize a defense. But Hannah's team was already moving, already adapting. When ammunition ran low, they used grenades. When grenades ran out, they used knives. When a Krethian soldier cornered Taiyang, the young man grabbed a piece of broken pipe and battered the alien's helmet until it cracked. 30 minutes later, the engineering section was secured. Hana had lost 4 soldiers, but the destroyer was theirs. She accessed the ship's controls and locked out the bridge's command functions. Then she set a course directly for the nearest Krethian capital ship. "All personnel, abandon ship," she transmitted to her remaining team. "Get to the escape pods. This ship is now a guided missile." On Earth, Taiho Kim had returned from the Galactic Council with observers in tow. Representatives from 6 different species, sent to witness what they expected would be humanity's final stand. Instead, they found themselves watching something unprecedented. The representatives stood in Earth's military command center, staring at holographic displays, showing battles across the solar system. What shocked them wasn't the fighting itself, but how the humans fought. "They're modifying themselves," the Ethel representative shimmered with what might have been horror. "Look at those soldiers. Cybernetic implants. Genetic modifications. They're changing their own bodies for war." Taiho followed the alien's gaze to a display showing Generation Zero soldiers, volunteers who had undergone extensive augmentation. They were stronger than baseline humans, faster, more resilient, and they were completely willing to die for Earth. "Temporary modifications," Taihe explained calmly. "Reversible once the war ends. We do what's necessary." "No species does this," another observer said. "It's unnatural. It's wrong." "What's wrong is invading our home," Taiho replied. "We asked for peace. We begged for protection. The Council denied us. So we protect ourselves." On the main display, a feed showed Generation Zero soldiers boarding a Krethian battleship. They moved like machines, coordinated and efficient, their enhanced bodies allowing them to fight for hours without rest. The Krethian defenders fell back, unable to match the humans' relentless pace. "This is what you wanted to see, isn't it?" Taiho asked the observers. "You came to watch Earth fall. Instead, you're watching us win." "This isn't victory," the Ethel representative said. "This is mutual destruction. Maybe." Taiho pulled up casualty figures. 4 million human dead. Military and civilian. Children. Elderly. People who had never wanted war. But we're still here. And the Krethians are learning that there are worse things than losing a battle. They're learning what it means to fight an enemy that won't stop. In orbit around Mars, Admiral Hyun-woo Park prepared humanity's next move. Dr. Nari Choi had developed a new weapon, something so terrible that even she had hesitated to build it. "Are you sure about this?" she asked over the com channel. "Once we deploy these, there's no going back. The galaxy will see us as monsters." Hyun-woo looked at the casualty reports scrolling across his screen. 4 million dead. Entire cities destroyed. Children orphaned. Families broken. They already see us as primitives worth enslaving. I'd rather be monsters who survive than victims who die with dignity. Deploying kinetic bombardment platforms, Nari said quietly. Throughout the asteroid belt, automated platforms activated. Each one was simple. Just engines, targeting systems, and mass. Asteroids, some as large as city blocks, were accelerated toward predetermined coordinates. Not toward Earth, toward the Krethian fleet. The Krethians detected the incoming objects and adjusted course to avoid them. But there were hundreds of asteroids, all on collision trajectories. The fleet scattered, raking formation, each ship trying to find safe passage. That's when the human fleet struck. Every remaining Earth vessel, every fighter, every armed civilian craft, launched simultaneously. They hit the scattered Krethian ships from multiple angles, exploiting the broken formation. Hyun-woo watched his tactical display as chaos consumed the battlefield. A Krethian cruiser tried to maneuver around an asteroid and ran directly into a spread of human missiles. A destroyer focused its weapons on an incoming rock and didn't see the fighter squadron flanking it. Ship after ship, the Krethians died, not because humans had better technology, but because humans had weaponized unpredictability. "They're rooting," Captain Minnow reported from the Indomitable's bridge. "Sir, the Krethian fleet is attempting to retreat." "Don't let them." Hien Wu's voice was cold. "They came here to conquer. They destroyed our cities, killed our people. Now they learn the price of that choice. Pursue and destroy." The order went out across the human fleet. No mercy, no quarter. The Krethians had wanted war, and humanity would give them war in its purest, most terrible form. Dr. Yunju Yang watched the battle from Earth's surface, analyzing data from captured Krethian equipment. She had discovered something important, something that explained why the aliens were failing. "Admiral, I need you to see this," she transmitted to Hyunwoo. On her screen, she displayed comparative physiology data. The Krethians evolved on a high-gravity world with abundant resources. They never developed persistence hunting. Their bodies are built for short, powerful engagements. They tire quickly. And more importantly, they've never faced an enemy that fights the way we do. "Explain," Hyunwoo said. "Every species they've conquered fought using similar tactics to their own. Formation warfare, honor codes, rules of engagement. We don't have any of that. We adapt, we improvise. We use tactics they consider dishonorable or insane. It's breaking their psychological framework." Hyunwoo understood immediately. So they're not just losing physically, they're losing mentally. Exactly. Their soldiers are experiencing something they've never encountered. An enemy that won't surrender, won't retreat, and won't fight fair. It's destroying their morale faster than our weapons are destroying their ships. This gave Hyunwoo an idea. "Dr. Yang, can you create a psychological warfare package? Something to broadcast to their fleet?" "What kind of package?" "Show them what they're fighting. Show them our history. Let them see what humans do to each other when we fight. If they're terrified of what we're doing to them, imagine how they'll react when they see what we've done to ourselves." Yunju worked quickly, assembling footage from Earth's history. The world wars, the guerrilla conflicts, the resistance movements. Centuries of humans killing humans with increasing efficiency and creativity. She added technical data showing weapon development, tactical evolution, the steady refinement of humanity's capacity for violence. The broadcast went out across all frequencies. Every Krethian ship received it. Images of human warfare, of cities reduced to rubble, of soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most alien species, of civilians taking up arms against invaders, of resistance fighters sabotaging occupying forces, and most terrifying of all, footage of humans laughing in combat, soldiers making jokes while under fire, pilots grinning as they dove into impossible maneuvers. The uniquely human ability to find humor even in the darkest moments. Aboard the Krethian command ship, Threxus watched the broadcast with growing horror. These weren't recordings of battles against alien threats. These were humans fighting other humans. This was what they did to themselves, to their own species. "Turn it off," he ordered, but the damage was done. Across his fleet, morale collapsed. Soldiers who had fought bravely for weeks began to question why they were here. Captains started requesting permission to retreat. Even his most loyal officers looked at him with doubt. "Sir, we need to withdraw," his second-in-command said. "We can't win this. The humans will never stop. Even if we kill 90% of them, the remaining 10% will still fight. And they'll remember. They'll hunt us across the galaxy if we don't end this now." Threxus wanted to argue, wanted to rally his forces for one final assault. But he looked at his tactical display and saw the truth. Of the 200 ships he had brought to Sol System, only 40 remained. 40 ships against a human force that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "Full retreat. Set course for Crethian space." "What about our soldiers on Mars?" his officer asked. Threxus closed his eyes. "They're on their own. We can't save them." On Mars, Major Dayun Lee received word that the Crethian fleet was abandoning the system. Around him, his remaining fighters cheered. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had actually won. But Dayun didn't cheer. He looked at the list of names, people who had died fighting in the tunnels. 60% casualties. People who had been miners and engineers just weeks ago, now dead because they had dared to defend their home. Victory tasted like ash dot in Earth's orbit. Admiral Hyunwoo Park watched the Crethian fleet jump to FTL, disappearing from his sensors. His crew erupted in celebration, but he remained silent. He thought about the ships he had lost, the people who would never come home, the price they had paid for survival. "Sir," Lieutenant Yun-Han said quietly, "we did it. We won." "No," Hyunwoo replied. "We survived. There's a difference." He opened a channel to all Earth forces. "This is Admiral Park. The Crethian fleet has retreated. The battle is over. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors. And prepare casualty reports. Everyone who died defending our home deserves to be remembered." As his crew worked, Hyunwoo sat alone in his command chair and wept for the first time since the war began. The Crethian homeworld hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in gleaming cities that had stood for 10,000 years. Those cities had never known war. The Crethian people had conquered dozens of species, but no enemy had ever reached their home. They believed themselves untouchable. Then the human fleet arrived. 47 ships appeared at the edge of the system, emerging from FTL with weapons armed and shields raised. They were battered vessels, scarred from weeks of combat, held together with emergency repairs and sheer determination. But they were here, following the retreating Crethian fleet all the way back to their homeworld. Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the Crethian planet grow larger on his display. Behind him, his crew worked in tense silence. They all knew what this meant. This was the moment when humanity showed the galaxy what happened to species that threatened Earth. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the planet," Lieutenant Yun-Han reported. "Multiple channels. All of them are begging us not to attack. Put the main one through." Warlord Threxus's face appeared on the screen, but he looked nothing like the arrogant conqueror who had dismissed Earth at the council. He looked old, tired, defeated. "Admiral Park, I am requesting a ceasefire. The war is over. We have withdrawn from your system. There is no need for further bloodshed." Hyunwoo studied the Crethian for a long moment. "You came to our home. You destroyed our cities. You killed 4 million of our people. And now you ask for mercy?" "I was wrong," Threxus said, and the admission seemed to cost him everything. "The Elder warned me. I didn't listen. Please, Admiral. My people are not warriors. They are civilians, families, children. If you attack our world, you will kill billions who had no part in this war. Like the 4 million humans who had no part in your war." Hyunwoo's voice was cold. "How many of them were civilians? How many were children?" Threxus had no answer. Hyunwoo looked around his bridge at his crew. Young people who had lost friends, family, everything they loved. They deserved revenge. Earth deserved revenge. He could give the order right now, and his fleet would reduce the Crethian homeworld to a smoking ruin. Instead, he said, stand down from combat alert. Maintain position at planetary bombardment range, but do not fire. His crew stared at him in shock. Captain Minho spoke up. Sir, with respect, they deserve this. After what they did to us, they deserve worse, Hyunwoo interrupted. But we're not going to give it to them, because if we do, we become exactly what the galaxy thinks we are. Savages. Monsters. We're going to show them something different. He turned back to the screen, showing Threxus. Here are my terms, Warlord. Complete demilitarization of the Krethian Empire. Your fleet will be reduced to defensive forces only. You will pay reparations to Earth for the next 100 years. And you will stand trial at the Galactic Council for war crimes. Accept these terms, or we finish what you started. Threxus nodded. Slowly. I accept. All of it. Good. You have 1 week to begin implementation. We'll be watching. The transmission ended. Hyunwoo sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. They had won, but it felt hollow. Victory always did when you counted the cost. 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Taeho Kim walked into the chamber with Admiral Hyunwoo Park at his side. The 12 species sat on their pedestals, but this time they looked at the humans with something approaching fear. Elder Vorthis descended from his pedestal as Taeho approached. The ancient being moved slowly, his old eyes studying the human with something that might have been sadness. You proved me right, Vorthis said quietly, though I wish you hadn't needed to. You tried to warn them, Taeho replied. They chose not to listen. The Ethel representative shimmered into view. The Council has reviewed the combat recordings. The tactics employed by human forces were ... disturbing. Suicide attacks. Biological weapons. Psychological warfare. These are not the actions of a civilized species. Hyunwoo stepped forward. Civilized? You want to talk about civilized? The Krethians came to our world planning to enslave every human being. They bombed our cities from orbit. They killed 4 million people who had done nothing wrong. And you call our response uncivilized? You used weapons the galaxy abandoned centuries ago, another representative said. Chemical agents. Nuclear weapons. You even weaponized civilian equipment. Because we had to, Hyunwoo said simply. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and abandoned by this council. We used everything we had. Everything. And we won because we were willing to do what the Krethians weren't. We were willing to sacrifice everything to protect our home. You proved yourself. Dangerous, the Ethel representative said. The Council must consider whether Earth should be quarantined for the safety of other species. Taeho laughed, a sound without humor. Quarantine us? After we just defeated the most powerful military in this sector? You think you could enforce that? The chamber fell silent. Let me be very clear, Taeho continued. Earth didn't start this war. We didn't want this war. We came to you asking for protection, for peaceful coexistence. You denied us. You allowed the Krethians to invade our space, to kill our people. So we defended ourselves. And now you're afraid of us, because we won. Elder Vorthis spoke up, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber. The Council fears what it does not understand. But I understand. I told you all, 50,000 years ago, my people made the same mistake the Krethians made. We thought humans were weak because their technology was primitive. We were wrong. He turned to address the full council. I want to tell you what I learned that day, so long ago when my people fled Earth. Humans are persistence hunters. Their bodies evolved to run down prey over days and weeks. They can keep going when any other species would collapse. But more than that, their minds evolved to never give up, to keep trying until they succeed or die. This is not savagery. This is survival refined to an art form. The Quellan expedition landed on Earth seeking slaves, Vorthis continued. We had weapons that could destroy mountains. We had technology beyond anything the primitive humans possessed. And they killed 70% of us with sharpened stones and wooden spears. Do you know how? No one answered. They learned our patterns. They adapted to our tactics. And they never, ever stopped coming. We would kill dozens of them, and more would appear. We would destroy their camps, and they would rebuild. We would track them to their hiding places, and they would ambush us. For 6 months, they hunted us. 6 months of constant attacks, constant pressure, constant fear. When we finally retreated to our ships, we left behind 3,000 of our people, dead on a world we thought we could conquer easily. Vorthis looked at Tayo with something like respect. That is what the Krethians learned. That is what this council needs to understand. Humans are not dangerous because of their weapons. They are dangerous because they refuse to accept defeat. A new voice spoke from one of the pedestals. A representative Tayo didn't recognize, from a species whose name he had never learned. If humans are so dangerous, why did you not destroy the Krethian homeworld? You had the opportunity. You had the justification. Hunwoo answered, because we're not monsters. We fight when we have to. We kill when we must. But we don't commit genocide. We could have reduced the Krethian homeworld to ash. Instead, we offered terms. That's the difference between us and the species you should actually fear. The Council grants Earth full member status, the Ethel representative announced, though it sounded reluctant. You will have voting rights and protected space extending to your system's edge. But understand, humanity will be watched carefully. Watch all you want, Tayo said. Just remember what happens when you threaten us. As the council session ended, Elder Vorthis approached Tayo privately. They stood together at the chamber's observation window, looking out at the stars. Your people paid a terrible price, Vorthis said quietly. 4 million dead, Tayo replied. Cities destroyed. Families broken. Yes, we paid a terrible price. But we survived. And the galaxy knows now that Earth is not to be trifled with. They fear you. Good. Fear keeps the peace better than trust ever did. Vorthis nodded slowly. There is wisdom in that, though it is a hard wisdom. Your species will face challenges ahead. Not all conflicts can be solved with determination and stubbornness. We'll figure it out, Tayo said. We always do. Back on Earth, in a quiet memorial hall built in the ruins of what had once been Seoul, a man named Sung-ho Bae stood before a wall covered in names. 4 million names. Every person who had died defending Earth from the Krethian invasion. His daughter's name was there, halfway down the third panel. She had been 9 years old. Sung-ho had volunteered to read the names aloud. All of them. It would take 72 hours, reading continuously, but he had insisted. Someone needed to remember. Someone needed to speak their names and acknowledge that they had existed, that they had mattered. He began to read. Minseo Park, aged 9. Killed in the bombing of Seoul. Yemin Choi, aged 47. Died defending the lunar platforms. Hyrin Kim, aged 19. Killed in the Battle of Mars. The list went on, and on, and on. People gathered to listen, standing in silence as the names echoed through the hall. Some wept, some stood frozen. All of them understood what these names represented, the price of freedom. The cost of survival. News of Sung-ho's reading spread across the galaxy. Other species watched in fascination and horror as this one human stood before a wall of names and read for 3 days straight. No breaks, no rest. Just name after name after name. The broadcast reached the Krethian homeworld. Threxus watched it from his cell, where he awaited trial. He listened to the names and felt the weight of what he had done. These weren't statistics. They weren't casualties. They were people, each one a life cut short because of his arrogance. On the third day, Sung Ho reached the final name. His voice was hoarse, barely audible, but he forced the words out. Jiwang Kong, aged 32, pilot, died destroying the Krethian flagship. Silence filled the memorial hall. Sung Ho stood there for a moment, swaying on his feet, then collapsed. Medical personnel rushed to help him, but he waved them away. "I'm fine. I just needed to finish." The broadcast ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy. Species that had viewed humans as primitive savages saw something different now. They saw people who honored their dead, who remembered their sacrifices, who understood the true cost of war. In the Galactic Council chamber, Elder Vorthis watched the final moments of the broadcast and spoke softly to himself. "I tried to warn them. I told them Earth's power must never be tested. They thought I meant your weapons, your technology, your military strength." He looked out at the stars, thinking about the humans and their terrible, beautiful determination. "I meant your will, your refusal to surrender, your capacity to endure suffering and keep fighting anyway. That is Earth's true power, not ships or bombs or soldiers. The simple, stubborn refusal to give up." Weeks later, Tai-Ho and Hyun-Woo stood together on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. The planet showed scars from the war, scorched continents, cratered cities. But life continued. People rebuilt. They always did. "Do you think it's over?" Hyun-Woo asked. "The war?" "Yes. The Krethians won't trouble us again. But the consequences? Those are just beginning." Tai-Ho gestured at the planet below. "We showed the galaxy what humans can do when pushed. Some species will respect that. Others will fear it. And a few will see it as a challenge. Ben will face them too. Yes, but not today. Today, we rebuild. We remember. We honor the people we lost." Hyun-Woo nodded. 4 million names. 4 million people who didn't ask for this war, but died anyway. We owe them something better than just survival. We owe them a future worth the price they paid. Tai-Ho agreed. A galaxy where Earth is never threatened again, where humans can live without fear, where the sacrifice meant something. They stood in silence for a while, watching their scarred but surviving world turn below them. The war was over. Earth had won. But both men understood that the real work was just beginning. Building a peace was harder than winning a war. But if humans could survive what the Krethians had thrown at them, they could.